The great city of Velora stretched across the horizon like a sea of silver and glass. Towers shaped like spirals rose into the sky, their tips glowing softly under the light of twin suns. Wide platforms floated in the air, carrying travelers from one district to another. The alien world looked alive, breathing with energy and mystery. Among the many alien visitors who stepped onto the ceremonial landing docks that day, one figure stood out not because of height, not because of strange clothing, but because he was different. He was human. His name was Aaron, and his role was simple, at least on paper. He had come to sign a treaty. Yet for him, the journey was much more than an official duty. It was a bridge between worlds. Humanity had spent generations reaching for the stars, and now they were standing at the threshold of acceptance into the vast alliance of alien civilizations. As Aaron walked down the shining ramp of his small ship, eyes turned toward him. He was not tall like the Sarati nobles, nor did he wear a crown of light like the envoys of other races. His clothing was plain, a dark suit with a simple crest of earth sewn on the chest. Still, there was something about him that made others pause. The Sarati soldiers, tall and armored in bright metal, watched him with calm eyes. They were known across the galaxy as proud protectors of their empire. Behind them stood the Sarati courtiers, dressed in flowing robes with patterns that shimmered like water. Their gazes were curious, almost cautious. Aaron kept his steps steady. He reminded himself that he carried not only his own weight but also the hopes of billions of people back home. He had rehearsed his words many times during the long journey, but in truth, he was not sure if words would be enough. The Grand Hall of Diplomacy was a marvel. High ceilings arched above, painted with stars and constellations of unknown galaxies. Long banners hung down, each one carrying the crest of a different world. And at the very center, on a throne carved from living crystal, sat Queen Syria, ruler of the Sarati Empire. Her presence commanded silence. She was tall, her form elegant, her crown woven into her long hair like strands of light. Her eyes, deep and calm, studied Aaron with a gaze that seemed to pierce through layers of thought. The hall grew quiet as the human approached. Each step echoed on the shining floor, a reminder that he was alone among giants. Many alien leaders watched closely, their whispers hidden behind folded fans or subtle movements. Some doubted why a small world like Earth should even have a seat among them. Others were simply curious about the human who dared to stand before their queen. Aaron stopped at the center of the hall, bowed slightly, and raised his head. He did not try to match the grandeur around him. Instead, his voice was calm, steady, and respectful. "Your Majesty," he said, his words echoing through the chamber. "I come on behalf of my people, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as partners. We seek friendship. We seek peace." His words were simple, yet they carried a weight that surprised many. Other envoys often spoke of power, resources, and alliances built on advantage. But this human spoke of peace. Queen Syria tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, the silence stretched, filled only by the faint hum of the floating crystals that lit the hall. Finally, her voice, clear and steady, filled the chamber. "You are far from your home, human. And yet, you speak without fear. Why should the Sarati Empire hear your request? What makes your people worthy of a place among the stars?" The question was sharp, but Aaron did not flinch. He looked up, his eyes steady. "We are not the strongest," he admitted. "We are not the oldest. But we are survivors. On our world, we faced storms that shook the seas, deserts that stretched beyond sight, winters that froze the land. We endured them. We adapted. And in our hearts, we carried hope. That is what makes us worthy, not our weapons, not our wealth, but our will to keep moving forward." His voice grew stronger as he spoke, not with arrogance but with conviction. The hall remained silent, but the queen's eyes lingered on him longer than expected. Around the chamber, alien envoys exchanged glances. Some frowned, unimpressed by his plain words. Others raised their brows, surprised by the honesty that came from someone so small compared to the giants of the galaxy. The queen's lips curved ever so slightly, not a smile, but not disapproval either. It was as if she had found something unexpected in this human envoy, something she had not seen in countless rulers and leaders before. At last, she rose from her throne. Her tall figure cast a long shadow across the shining floor. "Then let us see," she said softly, her gaze still locked on Aaron. "Let us see if your people's hope is strong enough to stand among empires." The chamber filled with a low murmur as she stepped down from the throne, walking toward the human envoy. Aaron bowed again, not out of weakness, but out of respect. At that moment, the story truly began, not of treaties alone, but of an unexpected bond that would change the course of two worlds. The hall of diplomacy emptied slowly after the ceremony. Delegates and courtiers whispered to each other as they left, their words hidden behind polite gestures. Some looked curious about the human envoy. Others appeared doubtful, even dismissive. But all of them carried the same thought: the queen had shown unusual interest in Aaron. Aaron himself did not notice all the whispers. His mind was filled with the weight of the queen's words, "Let us see if your people's hope is strong enough to stand among empires." He understood that his real work was only beginning. The treaty would not be signed with ink and paper alone. It would be tested through trials, questions, and judgment. When the last of the alien leaders left the chamber, a Sarati guard approached Aaron. The guard's silver armor reflected the light of the floating crystals, and his tall form loomed over the human. Yet his voice was polite and formal. "The queen requests your presence," the guard said. Aaron followed the guard through winding corridors carved into the living crystal of the palace. The walls glowed softly, as if the stone itself carried light. The path was silent, broken only by the sound of Aaron's footsteps and the gentle hum of energy flowing through hidden channels. At last, they reached a pair of tall doors that opened soundlessly. Inside was a chamber far smaller than the grand hall, but no less impressive. The ceiling arched high above, painted with flowing patterns that shifted slowly like moving water. A wide window looked out upon the shining city, its towers glowing under the twin suns. And at the center stood Queen Syria. She was without her throne, without the heavy crown she had worn in the hall. Instead, she stood in a robe of deep blue, simple compared to her formal attire, though still filled with quiet dignity. Her presence seemed calmer here, though her eyes remained sharp. "Come forward, human," she said. Her voice was softer than before, but it carried the same strength. Aaron stepped into the room, bowing respectfully. "Your Majesty." For a moment, the queen studied him in silence. Then she asked, "Tell me, Aaron of Earth. Do you know why I allowed this meeting?" Aaron considered carefully. "Perhaps to test me further," he said honestly. "Or perhaps because you seek to know if my words in the hall were true." A faint curve touched the queen's lips, not quite a smile, but something close. "Both are correct. I have spoken to many rulers, envoys, and conquerors. Most speak of power. Most speak of wealth. But you spoke of storms, deserts, winters, and hope. Why?" Aaron lifted his head. "Because that is who we are. My people are not the strongest. We have fought against the weight of our own world more than against each other. Nature shaped us. Every challenge forced us to change, to adapt, to survive. That is what I know. That is what I believe." The queen walked slowly to the window, her tall figure framed by the glowing city beyond. She looked out as she spoke. "On Velora, we did not fight against the world. The world bent to us. Our rivers, our skies, our soil, they served us well. Our strength was not in survival, but in rule. Perhaps that is why your words caught my attention." Aaron stepped closer, though still keeping respectful distance. Then maybe we have something to share. Your people know stability. My people know struggle. Together, perhaps we can build something stronger. Her eyes turned back to him, calm yet searching. You speak of togetherness. But tell me this, if your people were tested, if the alliance demanded sacrifice, would you still hold to your hope? Or would you choose safety over honor? The question struck deep. Aaron thought of Earth, of the billions of lives depending on him. He thought of the doubts whispered in the corridors of power back home, where some leaders believed humans should remain cautious and hidden. Yet he also thought of the farmers who endured storms, the workers who built ships with their bare hands, the dreamers who looked up at the stars. We would choose to stand, Aaron said firmly. We may fall, but we will rise again. That is what humans do. The Queen studied him for a long moment. Her gaze was not cold now, but thoughtful, almost curious. Finally, she gave a small nod. Very well, she said. Tomorrow, you will face a trial. Not of war, but of mind. The council wishes to see if your people's spirit can be proven. Do not take it lightly. Aaron bowed his head. I will do my best. The Queen's voice lowered, almost a whisper, though still carrying authority. Do not do it only for your best. Do it for your people. Do it for the place you seek among the stars. The chamber grew quiet again. The Queen turned her gaze back to the city outside, and the guard at the door stepped forward. The meeting was over. As Aaron left the chamber, his heart was heavy but steady. The Queen's questions had not been meant to break him. They had been meant to measure him. And in her eyes, he thought he had seen something rare, not only judgment, but interest. The trial ahead would decide much, but already the story had shifted. It was no longer just about a treaty. It was about understanding, about connection, and about whether a single human could carry the voice of an entire world. Morning came to Velora with a soft golden light from its twin suns. The city shimmered like a jewel, its towers catching the light and scattering it across the sky. The streets below filled with travelers, merchants, and envoys from across the galaxy. But while the city buzzed with life, the palace of the Sarati Empire prepared for something different. Inside the High Council chamber, the Queen's advisors gathered in a circle of crystal seats. Their faces were stern, their voices low but sharp. This human speaks well, one said. But words are easy. Anyone can claim strength. Hope is not enough, another argued. All species speak of hope before they fall. We must test him, declared a third. Let him prove his people deserve a place among us. Queen Syria listened quietly, her gaze calm as always. Finally, she spoke. Then it is decided. A trial shall be given. Let us see what he carries inside, not his strength of arm, but his strength of spirit. When Aaron was summoned, he stood before the council with steady eyes. He had expected something like this. Nothing in the galaxy came without challenge, especially respect. A tall Sarati official explained, "You will face the labyrinth of mirrors. It is no place of battle. It is a place of choices, of illusions, of truth. Many who enter see only confusion and fail. If you find the path to the center, you will prove your worth. If not, the treaty ends here." Aaron bowed his head. "I accept." The labyrinth was an ancient structure built deep within the palace grounds. Its walls were made of smooth crystal that reflected light in endless patterns. The passages twisted and turned, each corner showing reflections of things that were not real. For centuries, the Sarati had used it to test the wisdom of leaders and the clarity of their minds. As Aaron stepped inside, the doors closed behind him with a sound like thunder. Silence wrapped around him. His reflection stared back from every direction, hundreds of copies of himself, all walking when he walked, all stopping when he stopped. For a moment, doubt whispered in his heart. He was no warrior, no genius from the academies of Earth. He was just a man chosen for his steady voice and honest nature. Could he succeed where even some Sarati nobles had failed? He closed his eyes and took a slow breath. This is not about power, he reminded himself. This is about being human. And humans do not stop when the path is unclear. We keep moving. He placed his hand against the crystal wall. It was cold, smooth, and humming faintly with hidden energy. He turned left, then right, following not sight but instinct. Sometimes the mirrors showed him paths that ended in darkness. Sometimes they showed him visions of things he missed: his home on earth, the oceans and forests, faces of family. He longed to stop and watch, but he forced himself forward. At one point, the labyrinth shifted. The reflections showed him standing not as himself but as a conqueror, wearing armor, holding weapons. The vision whispered to him, "Take power. Rule through fear. That is the way of empires." Aaron shook his head. "That is not who we are," he said aloud. His voice echoed strangely in the mirrored halls. "We rise because we endure, not because we dominate." The image shattered like glass, fading into nothing. Hours passed, though time felt strange within the labyrinth. Sweat ran down his back, his legs ached, and his throat was dry. But still, he pressed on. Each turn tested his patience, his focus, and his resolve. Finally, after what felt like an endless struggle, he saw it, a single light glowing at the center. The reflections around him tried to trick him, showing dozens of false lights, but he stopped, closed his eyes, and listened. He heard the faint hum of energy, steady and real. He followed the sound, step by step, until he reached the true center. There, on a raised platform, stood a crystal flame that burned without heat. It pulsed gently, as if alive. Aaron stepped forward and placed his hand upon it. The labyrinth responded, its walls shifting, its illusions fading away. The doors opened, and Aaron stepped out, weary but unbroken. The council was waiting. Murmurs filled the chamber as they saw him emerge. Some looked surprised. Others frowned, unwilling to admit they had doubted him. Queen Sire arose from her seat. Her eyes lingered on him with quiet interest. "You walked the labyrinth of mirrors," she said. "And you did not falter. Tell me, human, what did you learn within its walls?" Aaron's voice was tired but clear. "That the hardest path is not outside us, it is inside us. The labyrinth showed me fear, pride, and power. But those are not what guide us. What guides us is hope, even when the way is unclear." The chamber grew silent. Then slowly, the queen gave a single nod. "So it seems your people carry something rare. The council may test you further, but for today, you have passed." Aaron bowed, his heart steady. He knew more trials would come, more doubts would rise. But for now, humanity had taken one more step forward. And in the quiet glance that passed between him and the queen, something unspoken began to grow, an understanding that reached beyond treaties, beyond politics, and into the realm of trust. The labyrinth trial was complete, but its echoes spread through the palace like waves across water. By evening, every hall, garden, and meeting chamber buzzed with the same question: how had a simple human envoy found his way through the mirrors? Some nobles admitted it with surprise. Others whispered it with doubt. A few insisted it must have been luck, not wisdom. Yet no one could deny the truth: Aaron had stepped inside a challenge built for rulers and had returned with calm dignity. In the Queen's council chamber, the voices of her advisors clashed like steel. "This is dangerous," one elder warned, his long robe trailing as he rose from his seat. "The human's words and deeds grow too loud." Already the other empires murmur of the Queen's favor. Another leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Yes. If she grants them the treaty, others will accuse us of weakness, of bending to a small world with no true power. Or worse," a third added, "they will say she grants him attention not for politics, but for Personal reasons. The room filled with silence at that. No one dared say more, but the weight of the unspoken thought hung heavy. Queen Syria sat still, her hands folded. Her calm gaze swept over her advisors. "You fear whispers," she said. "You fear envy. But truth does not bend because of fear. The human has walked the labyrinth. That cannot be denied." Still, when the meeting ended, even she felt the shift in the air. For centuries, her rule had been unquestioned. Now, a single envoy from a distant world had begun to stir currents she could not fully control. Meanwhile, Aaron walked the palace gardens, his steps slow upon the shining paths. He had been given quarters of comfort, but rest escaped him. The labyrinth still lingered in his mind, its illusions, its whispers of power, its visions of earth. Yet more than that, he felt the weight of many unseen eyes. As he walked, a young Sarati attendant approached, her tone hushed. "Envoy Aaron, you should be careful. Not all in this palace wish you well. Some see your success as a threat." Aaron paused. "A threat? I came only to sign peace." The attendant lowered her gaze. "Peace is not simple. To some, it is a prize. To others, it is a loss." With that, she bowed quickly and slipped away. Aaron watched her go, his thoughts heavy. So this is what it means to stand among empires, he thought. Not only tests of mind, but tests of politics. That evening, the Queen requested another meeting, this time in a chamber overlooking the great waterfalls of Velora. The water crashed down glowing cliffs, filling the air with mist and thunder. Aaron arrived to find her already waiting, her tall figure outlined by the light of the twin moons. "You have caused much debate among my people," she said without turning. "I expected nothing less," Aaron replied. "I know we are small compared to your empire. Many will ask why humans deserve a place here." The Queen faced him, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp. "And what would you answer, if one asked you now?" Aaron thought for a moment. "Because we are not afraid to try. We may fail, we may stumble, but we rise again. That is all we have ever done, and it is what we will continue to do." For a moment, her gaze softened. But then she straightened. "Know this, Aaron. Some among the council believe I give you too much time. They think my attention toward you unwise. They whisper as if I am swayed." Aaron shook his head quickly. "I never wished to cause you trouble. I am only here to speak for my people." "And yet," the Queen said, her voice quiet but steady, "trouble has come." A silence hung between them, filled by the roar of the waterfalls. Finally, the Queen turned her gaze back to the night sky. "The next days will be difficult. Some will seek to challenge you further. Others may try to make you stumble, so that your failure becomes mine." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Then I must not stumble." She looked at him again, and this time her eyes carried something unspoken respect, perhaps even a trace of admiration. "No, you must not. The path before you is more dangerous than the labyrinth." Elsewhere, in the shadowed halls of the palace, rivals gathered. Envoys from neighboring empires whispered together, their faces hidden in hoods and cloaks. "The Queen listens too closely to him," one hissed. "If she ties her empire to his people, our influence will weaken." "Then we must remind her what humans truly are," another said darkly. "They are fragile. They are untested. A moment of fear, a single misstep, and all will see their weakness." Their plan was simple, to create a moment of chaos, to force the human into failure, to prove to all that Earth was unworthy of the Queen's favor. Back in his quarters, Aaron looked out at the city of Velora, its towers shining under moonlight. He thought of Earth, of the faces waiting for him to return with hope. He thought of the Queen's words, of her warning that the greatest danger was not in puzzles or trials, but in politics and perception. And for the first time, he wondered if the treaty was truly within his reach or if the weight of whispers and envy would crush it before the ink could touch the page. Yet deep inside, he felt the same steady flame he had carried through the labyrinth. He whispered to himself, "We do not stop. We rise." The night grew quiet, but the storm of tension was only beginning. The palace of Velora gleamed under the light of the suns, but behind its shining walls, unease spread like a hidden fire. Whispers traveled from hall to hall. The human envoy had impressed the queen, and already her rivals were restless. Aaron did not hear most of these whispers, but he felt them. Every time he walked through the corridors, eyes followed him. Some were curious, some doubtful, and a few sharp with dislike. Still, he kept his head steady. He had not come for their approval, he had come for his people. The queen, too, felt the tension. In her council chamber, she heard the voices of advisors growing louder. "This cannot continue," one declared. "The longer he stays, the more attention he gathers. Already some accuse you of losing your judgment." Another leaned forward. "If he fails at any step, the Sarati name will be tied to his weakness. The empire cannot afford that." The queen's gaze remained calm. "And if he does not fail? What then?" The chamber fell quiet. None of the counselors wished to imagine that outcome, for it would mean the human success would change the balance of power in the galaxy. That night, a grand ceremony was held in the outer courtyard of the palace. It was a celebration of unity, attended by envoys from many worlds. Lanterns of crystal floated in the air, casting soft light across the gathering. Music from strange instruments filled the night, their tones deep and haunting. Aaron stood among the guests, his eyes wide at the beauty of it all. For a moment, he almost forgot the tension of politics. Yet his instincts told him that the night held more than music and light. The queen appeared at the height of the celebration. Dressed in silver and blue, she carried herself with the dignity of a ruler born to command. Her presence stilled the crowd. She spoke briefly of peace, of the importance of understanding between species. Her words were formal, yet Aaron felt them carry a quiet weight. As the speech ended, servants moved among the guests with trays of shining crystal cups. But in the shadows, a small group of cloaked figures watched closely. They were not servants, nor envoys. They were saboteurs. Their plan was simple: cause chaos, strike fear, and make the human look helpless. If he failed, the queen's trust in him would crumble. Aaron noticed at first a flicker of movement where none should have been, a servant stepping where no path was marked. His years of careful observation, his human habit of noticing the small and strange, made him pause. Then it happened. One of the cloaked figures lifted a device, a sphere glowing with unstable energy. With a sharp motion, he hurled it into the air. The sphere cracked open, spilling a storm of light and force. The courtyard erupted into confusion. Guests cried out as the air shook. Lanterns burst, shards of crystal scattering. Guards rushed forward, but the chaos spread too quickly. Aaron did not think. He moved. He saw a group of Sarati nobles frozen in fear beneath a falling structure of shattered crystal. Without hesitation, he ran to them, pushing them aside just as the pieces crashed down. Pain shot through his arm where a shard cut deep, but he clenched his teeth and stayed on his feet. Another saboteur reached for a second device, but Aaron grabbed a broken lantern pole and swung it hard, knocking the device from the alien's hand. It clattered across the floor, hissing with unstable energy. Without waiting, Aaron covered it with his jacket, pressing down to muffle the blast when it released its force. The explosion burned his side, but the courtyard was saved from far greater damage. The guards surged forward at last, capturing the attackers. The courtyard fell into silence except for the heavy breaths of those who had barely escaped harm. And at the center stood Aaron, his suit torn, blood running from his arm, his face pale but his posture firm. The queen stepped forward. For the first time, Her calm mask cracked. Concern showed in her eyes as she looked at the injured envoy. "You are hurt," she said softly. Aaron shook his head. "I am alive. That is enough." "You protected my people," she said, her voice steady but filled with meaning. Aaron looked at her directly, his eyes unwavering. "Because that is what humans do. We do not only protect ourselves. We protect those beside us, even if they are not our kind." The crowd, still shaken, whispered among themselves. Many had doubted him before, but now they had seen with their own eyes, the human was not weak. He had stood in the face of danger without weapons, without power, and still acted with courage. The queen gave a single command, and healers rushed forward to tend to his wounds. But even as they worked, her gaze lingered on him. Something within her had shifted. She had seen leaders defend their power, seen soldiers defend their honor. But here was a man who defended lives without thought of gain, without fear of pain. Later that night, as Aaron lay in his quarters with his arm bandaged and his body aching, he thought of Earth again. He thought of how small his people were compared to the empires of the stars. Yet he also thought of what the queen had said, "You protected my people." Perhaps, he wondered, that was humanity's place among the stars, not to rule, not to dominate, but to remind the galaxy of something many had forgotten, the courage to care. And far away, in her private chambers, Queen Syria sat in silence, her mind restless. The human had risked his life for her people without hesitation. She felt the weight of her empire's politics pressing down, but another thought now pressed harder. What if this human envoy was more than just a voice of peace? What if he was the proof that hope itself could still shape empires? The night deepened, but the question lingered, marking the beginning of a change she could no longer ignore. The sun rose slowly over Velora, painting the crystal towers in soft gold. Yet inside the palace, silence ruled. The events of the previous night still weighed on every corner of the empire's heart. The attack had failed, but it left behind more than broken glass and scorched stone. It left questions. Who had sent the saboteurs? Why target the treaty? And most of all, how had a single human become the shield of the Sarati nobles? In her private chambers, Queen Syria stood near the tall windows, her gaze lost in the endless sky. She had ruled for decades with steady hands and clear judgment. But never had a single envoy unsettled her council, her empire, and her own thoughts the way Aaron had. She remembered the moment he had thrown himself toward danger. He had not hesitated, not calculated what he might gain. He had simply acted. She had seen warriors defend honor, politicians defend pride, rulers defend power. But Aaron had defended life itself without condition. Her thoughts were interrupted when her chief advisor entered quietly. His long robe whispered against the floor as he bowed. "Your Majesty, the human envoy recovers in his quarters," he reported. "The healers say his wounds are not deep. He will live." The queen nodded. "And the council?" "They are divided," the advisor admitted. "Some say the human has proven courage. Others insist his recklessness shows he is unfit. A few," he hesitated. "A few whisper that your concern for him is unusual." The queen turned her gaze sharply. "Unusual?" The advisor bowed lower. "Forgive me, my queen. I only repeat what is spoken." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she dismissed him with a wave of her hand. When the chamber was empty again, she let out a quiet breath. Yes, she cared for her empire's image. But for the first time in many years, she found herself caring about something else as well. Meanwhile, Aaron sat on the edge of his bed, his arm bandaged, his side aching from the burns. The healers had done their work, but pain lingered. Yet what stayed with him most was not the wound, but the queen's words, "You protected my people." He thought of Earth, of how ordinary he was back home. A simple man with no crown, no armies, no special talent beyond his steady voice. And yet here, among the stars, his actions carried weight. Could it be that what made him ordinary on Earth was what made him different here? A knock at the door drew him from his thoughts. To his surprise, it was the Queen herself. He rose quickly, bowing as best he could despite his injuries. "Your Majesty, sit," she said gently. Her tone was not the sharp command of a ruler, but the calm request of someone who wished to speak plainly. Aaron obeyed, though unease stirred within him. Why would the Queen come to his chamber alone? She stepped closer, her tall figure outlined by the soft glow of the crystal lamps. For a moment, she simply looked at him, as though measuring something she had not yet named. Then she spoke. "Do you know why the council fears you, Aaron of Earth?" He shook his head. "Because I am different. Because I do not belong." Her lips curved slightly, not in mockery, but in something closer to thoughtfulness. "No. They fear you because you remind them of what they have forgotten. For generations, we have ruled through strength and order. We measure worth in titles, in victories, in power. But you," she paused. "You act without such measures. You risked yourself for strangers. You speak of storms and survival, not conquest. It unsettles them." Aaron lowered his gaze. "I did only what felt right. And that," she said firmly, "is what they cannot understand. To them, action must always serve gain. To you, it served life." Silence filled the room for a moment. The Queen's eyes softened as she studied him. "Perhaps that is what makes humanity rare. Not your strength. Not your numbers. But your heart." Aaron looked up, surprised by the warmth in her words. "Do you truly believe that?" "I would not say it if I did not," she replied. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the walls of formality seemed to fade. She was not only a queen, and he was not only an envoy. They were two beings, from two very different worlds, standing on the edge of something new. But then the Queen straightened, her regal mask returning. "The council will test you again," she said. "They will not stop until they are certain. Be prepared." Aaron nodded. "I will not give up." Her voice lowered, almost a whisper. "Do not give up, not only for yourself, but for what your people represent. The galaxy needs more than power. It needs hope." With that, she turned and left, leaving Aaron alone with his thoughts. Yet he no longer felt alone. The Queen's words stayed with him, her acknowledgement more valuable than any treaty signed. That night, Queen Syria sat once more at her window, the stars stretching endlessly before her. She realized that the human had changed something deep within her. For so long, she had ruled with clarity, with logic, with distance. But now she had seen something different. It was not his strength that lingered in her mind. It was his humanity, the ability to act for others without demand, to hope without reason, to endure without power. For the first time in many years, the Queen felt a quiet warmth in her heart. It was not weakness, as her council might claim. It was a reminder. A reminder of why she had chosen to lead, not to control, but to guide, to protect, to preserve. And she wondered, as the stars shone brighter than ever, perhaps this human was not only here to sign a treaty. Perhaps he was here to remind her, and her empire, of what truly gave worth to a people. The great hall of Velora Palace was filled once more. This time, however, the air was heavier than before. The alien nobles lined the crystal benches, their shimmering robes catching the morning light. The Sarati banners hung high, symbols of order and strength. And at the center, the throne of Queen Syria shone under the grand dome. Aaron stood at the far end of the hall, his injuries mostly healed but his heart still weighed down with unease. He could feel the gazes of dozens of Sarati nobles watching him, some filled with suspicion, others with curiosity, and a few with quiet respect. The treaty lay on a long table, unmarked, waiting to be signed. Yet everyone knew this would not be a simple ceremony. The council had demanded one last test. A final moment to decide whether humanity truly deserved a place among the stars. The queen entered, her presence commanding silence. She walked slowly, every step echoing through the chamber. Her eyes met Aaron's for just a moment, and in that small glance, he found courage. "Today," she said, her voice steady and clear, "we decide whether this treaty will be signed. Whether humanity, a young race from a distant world, shall stand as equals among us. The council has doubts. They ask, what can humans bring to the galaxy? Why should we trust them?" A murmur spread through the hall. Aaron's heart tightened. This was the moment everything had led to. The queen's gaze turned toward him. "Aaron of Earth. The council demands you speak not only for yourself, but for all your people. Tell us, why should humanity be welcomed into our alliance?" The hall grew silent. Aaron felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. His throat was dry, but he took a slow breath. He thought of the storm he had described earlier, of his village, of the endless struggles of humanity back on Earth. He thought of the Queen's words, "The galaxy needs hope." He stepped forward, his voice steady though quiet at first. "My people are not the strongest in the galaxy. We are not the oldest, and we are not the most advanced. Many here could outmatch us in battle, in knowledge, in skill. But strength alone does not make a people worthy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "What makes us human," he continued, "is that we rise, again and again, no matter how many times the storm knocks us down. We endure hunger. We endure fear. We endure loss. And still, we stand. We hope. Even when hope seems foolish, we hold on to it. Because without hope, there is nothing left to fight for." The nobles shifted uneasily. Some frowned, others leaned forward, listening. Aaron's voice grew stronger. "Your empire has stood for centuries because of your strength and your order. But even the strongest walls can crack. Even the brightest flames can fade. What will keep you alive when strength is not enough? It will not be weapons. It will not be titles. It will be the will to rise, to endure, to dream of more. That is what humanity can give. That is what we bring." Silence followed his words. The council looked to the queen. The queen studied Aaron for a long moment. And then, slowly, she rose from her throne. "Aaron of Earth speaks truth," she declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Strength builds empires. But hope builds futures. Humanity has shown us courage without calculation, sacrifice without demand, and resilience without end. These are not weaknesses. They are the rarest strengths of all." Her words carried power, more than any blade or army. She turned toward the council. "The treaty will be signed." A wave of murmurs swept through the nobles, but no one dared challenge her. One by one, the representatives stepped forward, pressing their marks upon the treaty. And finally, the queen herself signed, her hand steady and sure. The document glowed faintly under the crystal light. With that single act, humanity's place among the stars was sealed. Aaron felt his chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with pride. He had come here only to deliver words on paper. But somehow, he had carried the voice of his entire species. When the hall emptied, leaving only him and the queen, she approached quietly. Her eyes softened as she spoke. "You have done more than sign a treaty, Aaron. You have given my people something we had almost forgotten. You have reminded us of why we endure." Aaron bowed his head. "I only spoke the truth." "Truth," she said gently, "is the rarest gift of all." For a moment, silence stretched between them. The queen's gaze lingered, full of something unspoken: respect, trust, and perhaps even more. But she turned before it could be named, her robe sweeping behind her. Aaron watched her go, a quiet smile touching his lips. He knew his journey was not over. Humanity had only just stepped into the vastness of the galaxy. Challenges would come, dangers would rise, but he also knew this, they would endure. As the stars shone above Velora, brighter than ever, Aaron felt the weight of his people's future on his shoulders. And for the first time, he welcomed it not as a burden, but as a promise. A promise that humans, fragile yet unyielding, would prove their worth among the stars.